Right. Stacy, thank you for coming on and telling us about reminiscing about your work. This is Stacy Rendall. He works at Abley and works on software development and is actually applying some of the work he did in his PhD a little bit, probably more in the future. And he's going to help us look at the fun part of in-time methodology, which is looking in the distant future. So,
Thanks, Susan. So, yeah, it's easy to look back and think about what happened 100 years ago in the past. You can look up archives and talk to historians, but the real challenge is looking into the future. So, my PhD was a geospatial analysis to help us explore that world. In this presentation, we're going to visit Christchurch in 2120. And this is a place where we made the right investments and decisions now, and that helped us get past our wicked problems, such as dependence on fossil fuels, reliance on cars, and this kind of breaking ourselves out of the mold of this idea that the solution to everything is to build a new road. Now, in the rest of this presentation, we're going to use modeling tools from my research to help explore that future Christchurch. So right now, we've got a wicked problem, and it's really our reliance on cars or auto-based mobility in Christchurch. But really the essential need is to access activities. And, right now the system kind of works great. You have cars, you have roads, you've got cheap fuel. You can go and buy your giant Ford Ranger, which is the most popular vehicle in New Zealand right now. But it's not really sustainable to keep building and buying cars and keep building more roads and consuming more fossil fuels. But it satisfies the needs, I get to work, I get to school, I can do the shopping. But yeah, it causes problems. We've got congestion and pollution, accidents, social isolation and segregation because we're all just sitting in our tin boxes for hours a day. Well, but we want a green solution. So is that EVs? Well, yeah, maybe they help solve the pollution bit of the problem, but they don't really do anything about the others. And what about, human scale cities and new urbanism? These buzzwords that we hear a lot are not really taking us anywhere. And at the end of the day, is it just too hard to change? We just continue to sprawl, get new cars, build more houses, and grow the city beyond its limits. And we're back to the start because the system works great. We keep relying on cars, building more roads, and consuming more fuel. Just remember that the core of the thing that we're really trying to do is access our activities. So we talk about activities. It's kind of all the things that you need to do in your life, in your day, and over time. So it's based around the nucleus of where you sleep and live, where you make your meals, care for your family, get a bit of green space, and it goes right out. So work and school are obviously big activities that people engage in, getting food, shopping, and then social and leisure and religious activities and things like that. But that whole pattern, we can kind of observe that and think about that as an activity system that people need to do. And then behind the scenes, you've got goods movements, freight coming in and out. And we think about it, flows of food and water and waste and things like that, all moving throughout the city. So let's take a look back at how we did this stuff in 1900. So this is a picture from Christchurch 120 years ago, and it's showing how people were getting up in the high street in Christchurch. And we've done a bit of a count up, and it's actually 95% active mode share there. And the other people are on horses or in the tram. So, that can be done. People could get around actively without having to use fossil fuels. And the system worked. And we managed to dig up this old map of where the tram lines actually went in Christchurch. So we're going to focus a bit of our discussion today around Riccarton. And for those of you who don't know Christchurch, it's kind of on the west in the middle there, sticking out to the side. And so this network that we see in Christchurch was about 86 kilometres of electric tram, and people in the city then were about 95% active modes in how they got around. So the tram was kind of supporting them, but it wasn't used for all the trips or anything. And this slide is showing the results from my PhD thesis. And so the work kind of looked at people's activity patterns, where people lived, and the distribution of the things that people needed to get to. So the central city and surrounding areas around that are quite green because there's enough jobs in the local region. They can get to schools and shopping and all the activities that they need to. Now, by active mode, sorry. So their minimum energy consumption, we called it, was zero because they don't need to use fuel to get to all their essential activities. Now, as we step further out from these central areas, the yellow areas, through to the orange and red, that's increasingly that they're having to use fuel, energy, whether it's public transport or driving, to get to their essential activities. And the red areas, they're having to consume relatively a high amount of fuel just to meet their basic needs. So in our Christchurch of 2120, we really want this whole city to be green. We need everyone to be able to access the things they need to get to without having to use fuels. And we also want to make sure we're not emitting carbon. And actually, we need to be net negative so we can avoid as much of the catastrophes of global warming as we can. And that's kind of the forward operating environment that we'll be examining, because that's the future that we're choosing. So this future Christchurch is really a carbon capturing active mobility city. It's livable, houses and life is affordable. We've got a healthy environment, ultra low use of energy through our buildings and transportation and industrial sectors. We've got buildings that are made to last a long time because they're made out of quality materials and sustainably built. And people can access their essentials. And across the city, we've got a lot of diversity of activity and people, and at the same time, a lot of integration through those systems. Now, the connections and accessibility really tie the whole city together. So people have got transport access. The environments and production systems of the city are healthy and sustainable. Our residential, commercial, and public buildings and activity systems are all able to be linked in together. So this city of 2120, it's a garden city, it's a cycling city. Now the red dots we've drawn on the map here kind of show walkable urban villages that we envisage could be placed around the city. And each one of those is a distinctive urban center where cycling and walking help connect people into those cities, into the centers. And then there's e-bikes and e-scooters and even share cars. We don't think that people won't use cars at all, but they're not using cars every day. You'd still have a share car to go and visit your grandparents or get that big parcel that you need to from the shop. And then supporting you in your other daily activities, trams and trolley bus, trucks for moving goods around, obviously the train, port, and even the airplanes would still be functioning. So the other things to look at here on the map, we've got the walkable villages shown in red. Blue lines kind of show where cycle networks could run through the city. And the green tram lines are connecting these different walkable villages to each other for both moving people and for moving freight, food and produce and things like that. So let's take a look at Riccarton Road. So this is one of the main corridors right now. At the moment, it's quite a congested corridor filled with cars, and it's not a very pleasant place to hang out. And in 2120, it looks a bit more like what we've got up at the top there. There's trams traveling along Riccarton Road. There's space for cyclists. There's a nice wide footpath where cafes can spill out onto the street and people can just enjoy being there. And then the buildings look a bit different. We don't have monolithic industrial or offices, but things are sort of, retail on the bottom floors, office in the middle, and space for residential above. Stepping back a little bit from Riccarton Road, the streets that are slowly getting a little bit further away, there's a decreasing density and height of buildings and things like that, and a decreasing size of the streets. Still, these are active mode corridors, but a lot of the space in the streets is used for, so children can play, so food can be grown. We're not having to have so much car parking and space dedicated to roads, so we can reclaim a lot of that to do things that we want. And you might see the odd cafe scattered throughout here, not with the same intensity as you would have along a big corridor, but people can still kind of meet up socially in their very hyper-local area. And some of the other laneways would have a bit more of a slightly more reduced feel, smaller buildings once again, and good access by cycling and walking, and once again cafes spilling out on the street and things like that. So just stepping back a bit to look at our Riccarton area again, the Christchurch of 2120 has got this functioning tram system. So it's about 18 kilometres of tram that's connecting all the way from the central city through Riccarton down to the industrial areas below the railway lines and out to the airport. And Riccarton Village is forming quite a hub where all these different lines meet. And then freight can be delivered in the evenings, but people can use it for commuting if they work out the area, or as well as obviously travel and shopping and leisure. So to help this 2120 Christchurch, there's a development cooperative called From the Ground Up. That the purpose of this cooperative is to understand the activity systems within the city and ensure that they can be met. So as patterns change, people's interests and things change over time, From the Ground Up kind of pulls together what the city needs, works with the councils and governing bodies to make sure that the appropriate activities can be built to ensure people can get to where they need to. So if bowling, for example, has a massive resurgence in 100 years, From the Ground Up could be building some new bowling lanes, or just helping ensure that people can get to what they need to get to, because the urban form is able to work it within what the activity systems of the residents are. Now, if we zoom back in a little bit onto our village centre of the Riccarton area, so that's the yellow blob on the left there, and around that we see sort of the suburb around there is about an 800-metre walk. 800-metre radius is about the limit of this sort of Riccarton village. About 20,000 people live there, and within a 10-minute walk, they can get into the centre of the village. There might be about 30,000 people using the village as part of their activity system, and they might be within a 15-minute cycle. And probably in this area of 20,000 people, we might have 1,500 share vehicles. So within that, 800 meters radius to get into the city, these people are going to, into the village center, sorry, these people are going to be able to access a lot of the things they need. So that center is going to have some healthcare, education facilities will be scattered throughout the area, social things that people need to get to, the square where people can gather and have bigger events or concerts and things like that. And then around each of these kind of quadrants around the center has got its own sort of micro center that might have a few cafes and restaurants or a bar, a few smaller shops and things like that. And yeah, it's really a super walkable area that has got everything within that kind of 800-meter radius. And actually zooming right in on the center again, that we see there's the area for weekend markets, performance theatres or community halls, restaurants, bakery shops, library and council would have its offices there. Emergency services would be based from there, as well as community recreation centres, transportation hubs, because we've got the two lines coming in, and medical and things like that. And so remember, there's 20,000 people are using this village centre as their village centre. And right in near the centre, we're seeing probably the highest density of mixed residential homes and apartments with retail on the bottom floor and offices coming through. So what the kind of urban pattern looks like in this 2120 Christchurch, we see about half of the total land area is dedicated to residential, so buildings and private and semi-public ground. Another 4% to schools and education. Workspace is about 10% of the area, commercial, health and leisure, And we see a massive increase compared to present in the amount of public space. So streets and parks and squares, places where fruit and vegetables can be grown within the city. And it's all tied in together with the passenger tram and the freight moving systems, integrated activity systems, and share vehicles to help people get to those final things that they just can't reach. So the lunchtime discussion question for us to think about for Christchurch 2120, what do they have that we don't have?